Without wasting any more time, let's turn to our next guest, Alex Nwuba, who is the President, Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association of Nigeria, as we continue to explore possible solutions to the impending suspension of local operations by airline operators in the country, starting from tomorrow. Good morning. Good to have you in the studio with us.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Nwuba.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I would like to start by thanking you for the patriotism that this station has made towards this country. The fact remains that I have to thank you really because Arise is a 24-hour station. You also use diesel, and you use it on a 24-hour basis.
You can see that again.
And you're not talking about going on strike. The hospitals are not talking about going on strike.
That's right.
Neither are the schools or all of these organizations that are faced with the same challenges. The challenge is not unique to the aviation industry. So I must congratulate you and appreciate you. If the telcos went on strike as well, we'll end up with a situation where we can't even communicate. Yeah. So I'm here really to talk about what the real issues are and how we can address them. Thank you for inviting me.
The issues are beyond fuel, are they?
Beyond fuel. But, you know, to clarify that as well, Captain Mahmood, who was just here, the executive officer of Aero, said that it was not a strike. He's saying it is not a strike. The Airline Association of Nigeria have come together to say they cannot continue business because they have been running at a loss for years. And they cannot continue the business. What do you have to say about that?
There's nothing wrong with individual companies coming out and saying, look, this is not working for me. Yeah. I'm going to shut it down permanently, or I'm going to shut it down to restructure my business, because that's really what the challenge is about, is how do you restructure, given hyperinflation, which is happening on a global basis. Yeah. This problem is not unique to Nigeria. If you look at oil, if we talk about fuel so much, if you look at the price of jet fuel around the world, it's about the same benchmark, you know, €1, €2, exactly. So the pricing is not unique to Nigeria. The challenges are not unique to Nigeria. We talk about jet fuel being high prices. I started by diesel. Majority of us in this country use diesel to run most businesses and enterprises. Those prices are high as well. So how do we address that issue on a global basis? The real challenge is not fuel. The real challenge is how you operate in this global economy in which we're experiencing hyperinflation.
So it's essentially a question of the exchange rate, FX, for example, or we're just, our economy cannot withstand, you know, the global climate at this point. Because if jet fuel is €1, €2, that basically means that we'll be paying 600, 700. You'll be buying at 700 that you are buying at the moment.
Right. You see, when you're in business, you have what are your variable costs and your fixed costs. Yeah. And one of these costs is fuel. It is exchange rate. It's cost of spare parts. It's the exchange rate. I often hear on this show and many shows talking about the fact that there is no funds available in the banking system, so we have to reach into the black market. I often hear government officials talk of the black market as if it's a legitimate, acceptable means of doing transactions. And that's so. If dollars are flowing into this economy, if there's a higher premium in the black market, the money would go to the black market. Why don't we talk first about shutting down the black market so that all the money flows into the official channels so that we're able to trade all of these monies we're talking about within the confines of the official channels. So the problems are multifaceted. We have to deal with all of the issues, and that's the only role government can play. Government cannot be asked to choose between spending money on education and spending money on allowing you to fly to Abuja on a cheap fare. So, yes, foreign exchange plays a major part in that role. We can address the foreign exchange issues. But again, I think that the problem is, if you look at the way the airline industry is structured, you have 40-year-old planes in the market that consume a tremendous amount of fuel. You also have airlines like IBOM operating much more modern airplanes that have lower cost of operation. And so there are many things. The issue really is, as a company, as private companies or public company, etc., we really have to address. When prices go up, you change the airplanes. If you go, for example, to Asia, If prices go up, you say, okay, the prices have gone up. I can no longer operate these Boeing 737-300s. So I'll return them to the leasers and I'll take a smaller airplane because the market has shrunk for one instance, or the price of fuel has gone up. So it's really a question of how do we restructure this business? If fuel is such a high component, have you looked at your tickets? You see that taxes are equally a high component of the prices and sometimes exceeding the cost of the fare itself. So you look at the line items. The ticket, the actual cost of the trip is say $300, for example. And when you look at the taxes, it's $500. Okay, so the taxes are not part of the fare structure. So if we're really talking about consumers, we have to look at many more different issues than we are currently looking. So the issue is not fuel.
Okay, if we were to read from the statement that was released, the airline statement,
right.
It said, while aviation fuel worldwide is set to constitute about 40% of an airline's operating costs globally, they are saying that this present hike has shot up Nigeria's operation cost to about 95%.
Correct.
What is the profit margin there? Where do you think that they can even start to make profit?
Again, it's not a Nigerian problem. Okay?
Yeah.
Prices have gone up globally. So all global airlines are experiencing higher costs. As in every business, there comes a time when you can't take profit. If we look at the retail space, for example, we have seasonal sales. You see, they will tell you in the US, 70% of revenues in major retail comes during the Christmas holidays and Easter holidays. And the rest of the time, they're running the stores at a loss. We're actually faced with the challenge in this economy where we are going to run at a loss for some time because of hyperinflation. But look at oil prices. They are on a downward trend. And the leading cause of this is one of the largest suppliers of jet fuel is Russia. And one of the sources is Ukraine. So on a temporary basis, prices have peaked globally. They will come down. They're already coming down. If you look at crude oil prices, we've gone from about $120 to about $90 per barrel. The trend is downwards. And we think that this war would not last forever. At the point when we recover, then the prices will recover. The real challenge airlines face is capital. High cost of capital within this economy, including the foreign exchange component, of course. So if you take an airline like Ibom, the only reason they have chosen to continue to operate is that they understand that this situation will pass. And so you've got to sustain that relationship. Okay, you have airlines saying we're shutting down on Monday. How many emails did you get from the airline telling you we're shutting down on Monday and we're sorry that you're inconvenienced and these are the alternatives available to you? They simply say we're shutting down on Monday and to hell with everybody. That should not be the case. This is a temporary situation. Ibom obviously has recognized that this is a temporary situation. One of the bigger challenges, as I said, is capital. There isn't that much capital in this business. But what stops the airlines from converting from purely private companies and going to the stock market to raise money where you don't pay interest? It's one of the pivoting strategies. What stops the airline from right sizing? We always talk about right sizing. In aviation, when we say right sizing, we're essentially saying this Boeing 737-300 is too big for this market, especially if we increase. Obviously, nobody's saying lose money. And so the reality may be we may raise the fares to 150,000 for 50,000. It will triple. The passenger numbers will drop off tremendously. As we generally say, 5% of the public travel, so about 10 million unique people travel within the economy. If fares go from 50,000 to 150,000, maybe 1 million people will be traveling. They'll be paying a much higher fare. You wouldn't need such large airplanes. If you had gone with, say, a leasing model rather than an outright purchase model, you can change the airplanes to accommodate that size and tide yourself through that. But it may be that loans, credit may not be the business, may not be what supports your business at this time. But the issue is not to say I'm downing tools because we are faced with a challenge. You will always be faced with the challenges in every business, which is why I started by appreciating you for not downing tools, because you're also facing challenges.
That's right.
Yes.
When we look at the consumer side of this, that was the crux of what Mr. Mahmoud had to say to us earlier, that if they were to sell tickets according to the price increase in fuel, passengers will be paying in economy class upwards of 100,000 naira, more than 120, even up to 150. And so if we're looking at this from a consumer perspective, I'm sure many people at home listening to that would think, well, gosh, I don't want to pay 120,000 naira to travel from Lagos to Abuja or vice versa. And you're saying that, I know I don't want to put words in your mouth because I've been told I do this a lot, but you're saying that perhaps these airline operators aren't being fully honest with the real crux of the issue, that it's not only a consumer one that they're trying to protect. If it's not a consumer issue, and I know you've touched on capital and other things, but what do you think their biggest problem is if it's not protecting the consumer?
The biggest problem of the airlines is trying to stay in business and be profitable. Okay? The consumer will pay whatever it takes to fly if the necessity exists. The consumer was paying 19,000 at some point. Then they started paying 30,000. Now they're paying 50 to 57. In many instances, they are paying 80,000. What we have to understand is that this business is segmented. We talk again about why they fly is because of insecurity on the roads. But let's look at the insecurity statistics. Nigeria is not rated as one of the major markets where you have kidnapping. We're not even rated higher than France for robberies. Okay? So the so-called insecurity we talk about is not as bad as we paint the picture. So if I can't fly, for example, it's not a question of I can't afford to fly.
As far as aviation is concerned.
As far as aviation is concerned. Okay? Many times I want to fly to a number and the flights are always full. And so I drive, okay? I'm equally concerned about insecurity, but of course there's secure ways to travel via other modes. We know there's a real challenge on the Kaduna axis, but there isn't so much of a real challenge on the Lagos, Ogun State, etc. axis. So consumers at Ibadan have a choice in that regard. They have a choice to go by road if they're not able to pay 150,000 naira. But the reality is we cannot ask the airlines to charge money and lose money. So the consumers do have a choice.
But why should the consumers continue to pay? What is the landing cost for aviation? Why should they continue to pay those astronomical prices if they don't need to pay those prices?
Well, you know, our price is determined by an equivalent amount of input. You don't look at cost and say, on the basis of my cost, my price is this. You have various types of products. You have basic products. You have premium products. On a lady's bag runs $50,000, $25,000. It's made of the same leather as a $2,000 or $200 bag. That's a premium product. So it doesn't exactly relate to the fact that fuel costs this, so the airfare is that.
That's basically what they're saying. That's what AON is saying.
Correct.
Yeah.
But that shouldn't, yes, you're free to, the truth is, you're free to say anything as companies. That's why, okay, you say they're not, is AON a union? Are they supposed to collectively, does the law allow them to sit down in a room and have a conversation about the cost of input and the establishment of price? That's what FCCPC has notified the airlines that they do not agree with. And so when the airlines initially came out and said, we had a meeting and we agreed on this, they had to backtrack because that is illegal.
Yes, it's collusion.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so the question there again, we talk about the airlines. Individually, it's not every airline, by the way, that signed this agreement, even though they are members of AON. Even airlines that participated in the discussion about the challenges that the industry faced, some have come out at the end to say, look, when we look at the true circumstances, we cannot go through with this because we have obligations to our customers, we have obligations to our suppliers, etc., etc.
IBOM came out to say
IBOM has said that others will come out, others will fly. It's a fact that some others will fly, including some of those that said they will not fly. And some will not fly. The question becomes, on an individual basis, what is the basis for that? Profit is one thing. The consumer has a choice. The consumer, it is not the only mode of transportation that exists in the marketplace. The consumer has a choice.
Okay, so tomorrow and Tuesday,
yes,
there will be 2-day warning strike by aviation workers. Is that correct?
That's another issue entirely, okay? And the issues around, you talk about tomorrow and Tuesday. If you look at the statement released by Azman today, they said indefinitely. Okay? What does indefinitely mean? You remember the chairman of Azman is the chairman of AON, okay?
Yeah.
And so his position is that it will be indefinite. What is the position of others? Again, it goes back to individually. There will be a strike, they say. Maybe tonight, you know how these things work. There may be negotiations that take place tonight that prevent that strike from happening. So I'm not going to be a soothsayer and say there will be a strike or there will be no strike. It all depends on what happens in the course of today.
What's your advice to the passenger and to the authorities in all this?
I think the advice to the passenger is that IBOM has clarified that they will fly. If their seats, look to IBOM. If your airline cancels and you bought your ticket earlier, you are subject to, obviously, the contractual agreements that are set out. However, if you bought your ticket in the period where you were informed that there will be a strike and they still sold you a ticket, you have recourse available to you in the courts of law, obviously, because you bought a product under deception, basically. So the advice is, if you have to travel, make arrangements with airlines that, in the past, and currently in the present, not many of us actually buy tickets way in advance. Okay? Typically, we go to the airport and we buy our tickets to see who is operating. And I think we're going to switch back to that mode of going to the airport if we have to go. But we also have to remember that a year or almost 2 years ago, aviation shut down completely. The country shut down. It did not. We've adapted ourselves to doing business via messaging services, via electronic means. And so many people will adapt themselves to that situation going forward. So the advice to the consumer is look to see who is flying and go and fly with those carriers. Airlines will fly, okay, basically. The advice to the airlines is to have a rethink about this position. It doesn't serve it does not serve the economy. You talk about being a vital part of the economy. Flying is not just to go to Abuja for government contracts. Flying includes going on to court. It includes going for medical reasons. It includes moving your perishables at that situation. So airlines have to have a real rethink about this strategy. Yes, we'll lose money, but it's only short term.
All right, Mr. Alex Nwuba, we want to thank you very much for joining us and for giving us all these clarifications. Yes, sir.